Hello, Bravs. We're back with the Golem Remembered 1909 to 1980 Variations of a Jewish Legend by Arnold L. Goldsmith. I believe we're on what chapter are we on? Chapter 6. Abraham Rothberg's Sword of the Golem. If I'm honest with you, this book is hard to follow. There's too many books involved. Too many versions of the Golem. I'm not sure what I'm really getting out of this, but the topic still interests me. In subsequent chapters, the Golem grows more sullen and angry. When the rabbi awakens him one morning to send him to search in other towns for Jitka Mislikov, the missing witness who can save Mordecai Meisel under arrest for the blood libel, Joseph refuses to be touched after the blessing. He tells Rabbi Lo, "Command me, compel me, send me. Do not speak kindly to me. Rabbi, do not be gentle." His explanation of his feelings confirms the change in him. The rabbi has observed, "If you touch what is man in me, it hurts. If it hurts, it makes me more human. I cannot bear the pain of either." Entering a new village, the Golem feels like an Ishmael. I am so strange to other men as Jews are. As they are outcasts, so am I an outcast. If nothing else, I am a Jew because of that. This kind of feeling makes him sympathize with Jitka, who is as much an outcast among her own as he was. When he finally finds her, she admires his build and is the first person to treat him as a man, as a human being. She invites him on picnics, makes love to him, and asks why he never laughs. Unlike Jitka, who claims she hates people, Joseph says, "Though people spurn me and make me wretched, I would be among them. I would help them." Even though Rabbi Lo had commanded Joseph not to tell Jitka why she is needed back in Prague, he disobeys his orders and tells her all, because he is sensitive enough to realize that she will respond favorably to such treatment. In response to her query, he says that he too is a Jew. Their arrival back in Prague during the trial saves Meisel and the Jews temporarily, as it did in the tales of Rosenberg and Bloch. Only Joseph is hurt, as Jitka Sue runs off with a Hungarian ostler. She wanted the place she could call her own, a man she could call her own, the rabbi explains. When the Golem asks if he is not such a man, the rabbi reminds him of his purpose, his mission in life. A moan escaped the Golem's lips, and he sat there rocking his head as if it was too much, too heavy for him to carry on his shoulders. Rothberg's central irony is an effective stratagem to stir reader interest and enrich the texture of his novel. The Golem, created originally to use brute strength in the defense of the Jews, a creature obsessed with violence and cruelty, becomes more human and sensitive as he lives among people. In a way, the rabbi has become his alter ego. When Joseph complains of his loneliness, Rabbi Lo explains that this is his fate. He must remain a stranger and deny himself the ordinary satisfactions. In response to the Golem's argument that he did not choose to be what he is, the rabbi admits that this is essentially true of all people. None of us choose to be the creatures we are and we become. We are chosen and then choose to accept what we are. With this neat paradox, the rabbi is able to explain away the apparent contradiction of free will and a predestined existence. When Joseph begs the rabbi to set him free, Judah answers that only God can do that. Getting no satisfaction from this conversation, Joseph throws a childish temper tantrum. "I shall free myself. If I must be a murderer in defense of your Jews, then I shall be a murderer in my own defense. I will be free. I will kill you first, my jailer, my enemy. I hate you. I hate the sight of your face and the sound of your voice that taunt and pursue me wherever I turn. I shall take your head between my hands and crush it like an egg. I shall smite you into the earth from which you drew me forth. Rabbi Lo does not flinch as the Golem springs at him. Trembling, the Golem stood over him, his great fist raised high. Then he turned aside and hurled himself against the walls, striking them with his shoulders and fists, his head, until the house shook. Joseph pleads in vain with the rabbi to make him an ordinary man, not a hero with a mission. The rabbi feels sorry for the misery he has caused the Golem, but he sees himself as standing like the Lord's flaming sword that turned every way to keep the Golem from returning to Eden or going forward into the lesser paradise of common life. Joseph's misery is compounded when Rabbi Lo, fearing the Golem's growing interest in Kath Hach, decides to find the girl a husband. Pearl selects Jacob Nisan. Again, the reader is reminded that Joseph's role as Rabbi Lo's surrogate son. When the troubled rabbi feels like Abraham about to sacrifice Isaac, a comparison suggested previously by Pearl, when he has to inform the Golem of his plan, he wonders whether it is easier to suppress his compassion because he thought the Golem an incomplete man, not truly a human being, or simply because he had forced himself to concentrate on the Golem only as an instrument of salvation. His task is even more difficult because the clay from which the Golem had been formed seemed to have grown daily more sensate, thoughtful, and pained. When the bitter Joseph asks what happened to his free will, the rabbi can only fall back on his faith. Everything is in the hands of God, except the fear of God. Because Joseph refuses to accept this theological answer and threatens to marry Kath anyway, Rabbi Lo has to use his trump card and reveal that the Golem is incapable of having children. It would be a grave sin to inflict such a future on Kath. The Golem is stunned. Before he flees, he curses the rabbi, the Jewish people, and God. Engine of destruction, you have made me. Monster misshapen, you have created me. Despoiled of God's image and bereaved of man's solace, I shall wreak havoc on this world. From out of this hell you have made within me, I shall make a hell without. Everywhere I shall sow ruin and plant destruction. Whenever I see man like a wild beast, I shall destroy him. From this day forward it shall be war between me and men, between me and you, between me and God. The time of the Golem. That Rothberg has gone far beyond his predecessors, even the great Levick, in retelling the famous legend should be evident by now. He has succeeded in making the old new. A talented novelist, he has successfully combined an exciting plot, authentic local color, and complex main characters with layers of psychological implications and moral overtones. It would be a most unusual reader who did not care what happens to the individual characters and the whole community. Disbelief has been effectively suspended, and the reader now wonders how Rothberg will resolve the sociological, psychological, and moral problems he has been developing. Even with the foreknowledge of the previous Golem tales, even knowing what will happen to Joseph, the reader is compelled to follow the events to their inevitable conclusion. Oh, man. Before the public debate with the Catholic Church, Rabbi Lo is advised by Count Pogrom, the cardinal's emissary, to have Thaddeus killed. Such intrigue runs counter to the rabbi's moral philosophy. Once the killing began, there was no end, and so man lost his most valuable possession, his Selim Elohim, his godly image, that within him which distinguished his humanity. Thaddeus is, of course, declared the winner of the debate by the cardinal, who decrees that all copies of the Talmud and other Jewish holy books be burned the next day at noon in the square of the Judenstadt. A terribly depressed Rabbi Lowe stumbles on the long walk back to the ghetto, but just as a peasant is about to club him, the Golem, who had been standing at the back of the hall during the debate, comes to his rescue. Joseph quickly disappears again. But Judah is comforted by even this brief return and thinks of the Golem as his son. The paradox of the Golem being both David and Goliath is seen when Itzhak reports to his father-in-law that he has observed Kaith with Joseph in the cemetery. To Isaac, Joseph seems to have grown larger like Goliath, yet he admits something more human and gentle also moves in him, something imploring that might burst into tears or change into a caress. In this indirect way, Rothberg comments on Rabbi Lowe's split personality. The Golem is both compassionate and vindictive, soft and hard, capable of good and evil. The rabbi assures Isaac that the Golem will be our David, not their Goliath, but he is biased when it comes to his clay creation, and he blinds himself to the tragic possibilities. He sees only what he wants to see and is naively confident in his ultimate ability to control his automaton. Despite mounting evidence of Joseph's disobeying his orders, the Golem continues to see Kaith, even though she is betrothed to Jacob. When Kaith pleads with her foster father, to break her betrothal and let her marry Joseph, Rabbi Lowe decides to reveal to her that Joseph cannot have children. The hopelessness of the relationship is soon dramatized when Kaith is attacked by 4 hooligans attempting to rape her. Joseph rescues her just in time and wants to kill the men after hunting them down, but the rabbi forbids him to seek revenge. The Golem calls Rabbi Lowe a hypocrite. Apparently, it is good to kill only when the rabbis give the command. Joseph chooses to disobey and prefers to do evil. Before the violent climax of his plot, Rothberg probes Judah Lowe's mind and thus explores the psychological and moral implications of the developing action. As a man grows old, Judah concludes, pride dies along with passion. Yet his own passion to save the Jews of Prague has not diminished. Age brought the knowledge of how the writer... I lost my spot. Age brought the knowledge of how the Yetzer had in such ambition do good. What? Age brought the knowledge of how the Yetzer hid in such ambition. I can't read right now. God. Let me put my finger here. Yet his own passion to save the Jews of Prague has not diminished. Age brought the knowledge of how the Yetzer had hid in such ambition to do good, like a worm in a rose, and grew swollen from the pride of having done good. Man's propensity for evil can never be completely overcome. He decides the sage had realized this when they argued that without evil impulse, men would never build a house or take a wife or beget a child or engage in commerce. This Yetzer is man-wise. In man was. This Yetzer in man was. I'm really botching this. I apologize, but such is life. Let me look forward so I can see how much torture I have left in me. 33, and that'll be 8 pages. I gotta read more. The driving force subtler than the serpent snared man's most honored intentions, wound itself around his conceit, and provoked his obstinacy until, blinded by the majesty of his motives, man was moved to deception, delusion, evil. Could this evil propensity have been involved in the creation of the Golem? Was this the reason behind the estrangement from God which Judah has recently been experiencing? Why has God not been communicating with him in dreams or visions as in the past? In creating the Golem, he had hoped to profane a single vessel to keep from profaning many men, as Jacob wished to do. Those Jewish youth who, inspired by Jacob, were arming themselves for the coming battle, were prepared to walk in the ways of the nation, to lose their Jewish souls and perhaps their lives. They ignored God's words to Zechariah, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit. Was disobeying God and following man a form of idolatry that the Hebrew Bible forbade? Of one thing he was certain: he had prayed and listened and obeyed the voice of God in creating the Golem. How else would the vessel of clay have risen sensate from the river's bank? But Judah's attitude towards Joseph is ambivalent. Even though he despairs of Joseph who has fled from him, a part of him rejoiced in Joseph as well. The rabbi cannot help but admire Joseph's spirit, independence, and feelings as the automaton becomes more human. Perhaps God himself has such ambivalent feelings about Adam's descendants. Judah Lowe worries that such thoughts are blasphemous. Rabbi Lowe's confidence is restored when Joseph suddenly returns on the night of the first Passover Seder and slips into the place traditionally reserved for Elijah. In a silent, mystical exchange of scriptural verses with the Golem, the rabbi is convinced that Joseph is answering God's question. Who will go for us? It is God who has succeeded in turning the Golem's heart. A silent nod of their heads before the puzzled faces at the table seals the covenant. Listening to his grandson Bezalel ask the four questions, Rabbi Lowe is comforted by his faith in God's always having allowed a remnant to be saved. Joseph joins fully in the Passover ritual, having been taught well by Isaac, but he does not join in the family conversations and games. Most significantly, when it is time to recite the prayer, asking for God's blessing on the head of the house, Joseph substitutes the words, "My honored father," only at the conclusion of the Seder with the singing of the last three stanzas of Had Gadya, are Rabbi Lowe and the Golem able to foresee what is going to happen. There was no mistaking the look in the Golem's eyes as they sang the two verses that told that the angel of death then came and slew the slaughterer, and that finally came the most holy, blessed be he who slew the angel of death. The Golem's lips moved and shaped the words, but no sound emerged, no song. He knew he was the slaughterer to be slaughtered. He knew that Rabbi Lowe was his angel of death. The rabbi intuitively understands the Golem of satisfaction and revenge on the Golem's face as the song ends with the words describing God's final vengeance when the angel of death is destroyed. In chapter 21, Rothberg takes an old tale that antedates the Golem legend and adapts it to his purpose. As was explained in Chapter 1 of this study, the tale is based on Polish oral tradition and appeared in both Koop's Sagen und Erzählungen aus der Provinz Posen and Bergman's Legenden der Juden. In Rothberg's version, Rabbi Lowe has a nightmarish vision in which the angel of death is killing a long line of Jewish men until the rabbi strikes the knife from his hand. The rabbi then tears the scroll from the slaughterer''s hand and flees the synagogue. In his study, he reads the names inscribed and is happy because he has saved all these people. But then he notices that one corner is torn off and still in the hands of the angel of death. The chapter ends with the question, whose names were they? Those familiar with this old legend know that the one name that remained was the rabbi's, but Rothberg uses poetic license and prefers a different ending. The inevitable violence and tragedy of Rothberg's ending begin after Mordecai Miesel's death from natural causes. As the local authorities try to confiscate his possessions, despite the generous bequests left to the emperor and local institutions, Jacob and his men unload the wagons as fast as the bailiffs load them. Isaac, Jacob's alter ego, representing the other side of Rabbi Lowe's split personality, remains in the synagogue praying. When the rabbi appears, he insists that there be no violence. Pogrom, at the head of the troop of cavalry, scoffs at the rabbi's faith in the Messiah and man's reason. To him, all that counts is power. He views his view as the same as that of the Golem, who tells Rabbi Lowe that Miesel's wife, Frumet, would not have broken under torture the way her two nephews did. She knows the value and power of property, he says. When the rabbi compliments Joseph's intelligence, the Golem answers, "Suffering makes for wisdom, Rabbi." Rothberg interjects another early legend at this point, again using the dream technique. This time Rabbi Lowe dreams of the story of Rabbi Rabs sending a Golem with a message to his colleague Rabbi Zerah, who angrily restored the Golem to dust when the messenger was unable to answer any of his questions. Why Rothberg adds this tale from the Sanhedrin tractate of the Babylonian Talmud so late in his novel is hard to determine. But he probably intends it to serve as a foreshadowing of Joseph's death. Whatever the reason, its inclusion here is gratuitous and disruptive. Just as Joseph feels abandoned by God, Judah feels the distance between God and man to be greater than ever. They're two worlds separated by an impenetrable curtain. Man craves to understand the order in God's plan, but all he sees in this life is disorder. Only study of the law lifts the curtain and permits one to approach God on the other side. Judah's explanation of evil in God's universe is that man was purposely created imperfect. He must realize perfection himself. So too is his world not created in final perfection. Man must realize and create the world's perfection himself. The way of true conduct lies in keeping order in daily life and in recognizing order in the occurrences of the world around us. Sin is disorder. To put order into the world is man's messianic task. The pogrom finally breaks out in chapter 24 as the Christians reenact the Passion of Christ at Easter. While Isaac spends his time praying in the synagogue, Jacob becomes the Golem's teacher and explains the symbolism of the ritual they are watching from a roof. Surprisingly, Joseph says he would rather be with Isaac, but the rabbi sends him out with Jacob. The Golem is amazed at the similarity between the Christian prayers and the Hebrew Psalms. Jacob scorns the 22nd Psalm, which he sees as passive surrender to one's enemies. He points out the contradiction between the Christians' belief in Jesus' teaching to turn the other cheek and their carrying weapons in their religious processional. He knows that when they are inflamed with hatred for the Jews, who they are told killed their God, they will strike out in revenge. Both Jacob and Joseph feel the same yetzer in themselves and wonder if Rabbi Lowe also has it. Although they come to no conclusion, Rothberg's reader knows the answer is yes. Sorry, I got a hair in my mouth. That Judah Lowe has projected the yetzer in him on the Golem. Through this decomposition of his character, Rabbi Lowe's need for ego gratification and his propensity for revenge are sublimated. At the gate of the ghetto, the marchers claim to see blood pouring from the wounds of Christ, proof to them that the Jews have desecrated the host. The cry for each man to save his soul by killing a Jew turns through the streets. As Jacob's forces meet the foe in bloody combat, the Golem is at first reluctant to fight, the Isaac side of his personality dominating the Jacob. His arm seemed held back by Isaac's words, by the rabbis, by what he had learned himself. Even when he watches Jacob surrounded by 3 attackers, he hesitates, not just because of the indoctrination of his teachers, but because as a man in love with Kaith, he sees himself winning her if Jacob is killed. It is greatly to Rothberg's credit that Psychologically, it is greatly to Rothberg's credit that this psychologically complex motivation lifts his plot above two-dimensional cartoon simplicity, but the Golem does not hesitate for long and leaps to Jacob's aid. The Yetzer in him overcoming all other feelings. The fact that his propensity for cruelty and violence is enlisted on the side of the persecuted Jews greatly complicates the moral issue, reinforcing Rothberg's theme of the ambiguity of good and evil. Chapters 24 and 25 are the goriest and most violent of the novel. Rothberg omits little in his catalog of atrocities during the pogrom. The Jews are driven back to the 3 key defense points: the synagogue, town hall, and cemetery. The Golem is man's unleashed id, and he kills many Christians. However, Rothberg underscores the duality of this creature when he writes, his lungs panted with the joy of fighting, but his stomach turned with the nausea of murder. In a plot incident not found in any of the previous sources, the Golem singles out Thaddeus as his special victim. Although the friar tries to brain Joseph with the wooden crucifix he is carrying, Jacob deflects the blow with his sword and kills Thaddeus with his dagger. The Golem discovers Kaith's naked body in her bedroom, her neck broken. In a rage, he smashes everything within reach before cradling her body tenderly as he cries, wrapping some of her shorn golden tresses like a phylactery around his left arm. He goes insane as a blinding hatred blistered his eyes, striking out with his axe at everyone in his path. He kills Jews as well as Christians. Count Pokorny tries in vain to stop him as Jacob explains that the emperor has sent the hussars to help the Jews. To save a remnant, Joseph is unmollified, crying out, "I have no people, neither Jew nor Christian, nor father or mother, no wife or children," as he knocks Pokorny's sword to the ground and raises his axe over him in triumph. A bleeding Isaac staggers out to tell Joseph how he tried to save Kaith, tried to reason with the inflamed mob, but was beaten senseless. Taking out all his frustrations on this man of reason, faith, and nonviolence, the Golem blames Isaac for Kaith's death and splits him from head to groin with his axe. Too late. Rabbi Lowe appears where he was up to this time. The reader is never told, and orders the Golem to put down his weapon. He also commands the angry Jews not to touch Joseph. In vengeance, when Joseph complains to the rabbi, "You called me Golem," he replies, "When you are a Golem, there is no Joseph." As all the main characters withdraw to Kaith's bedroom, they find Pearl crooning over the body. Pearl accuses her husband of being Kaith's murderer, just as the Golem had accused Isaac. In this way, Rothberg suggests that passive men of reason and piety are just as guilty in this tragedy as passionate defenders. All are implicated. It is impossible to assign individual blame. I, however, can blame myself for this awful reading. I should not have started at 1:30 in the morning when I've slept 5 hours, so I will not read again in this condition. Tired. Help me, Gollum. All right, bros. Goodbye.